Welcome to my review for I Still Know What You Did Last Summer, directed by Danny Cannon and released in 1998. It stars Jennifer Love Hewitt and Freddie Prinze Jr., both returning from the first film. New to this one is somebody called Brandy, who I believe is normally more known as a singer than an actress. So I guess this is this franchise version of a Busta Rhymes type casting. In fact, at one point, Brandy's character Carla pulls some kung fu moves on a gym bag, so the film almost does a Buster 4 years before Buster. Now, there will be spoilers today, so if you still haven't seen I Still Know What You Did Last Summer, then look away now. The plot picks up a year after the events of the first film. Julie James has now seemingly decided she wants to be with Ray, and he wants to be with her, but they're having trouble making their relationship work because of the long distance. Plus, Julie still keeps seeing visions of the fisherman around and about, or maybe they're not visions, maybe the fisherman is actually stalking her. Not long after the film begins, Julie and Carla win an all-expenses-paid trip to the Bahamas for the weekend for them plus two others, but Ray doesn't want to go because of work, so what would have been his spot ends up going to somebody else. In fact, let's just pause at this point and evaluate Ray's choices here. So I'm going to put myself in his shoes. A trip to the Bahamas with Jennifer Love Hewitt as my partner, or overtime at the fisheries? Anyway, the foursome set off without him, but it's not long before they realise that the fisherman has followed them there. He's still alive, and he's starting to pick them off one by one, plus some of the staff at the resort that they're staying at. But luckily, Ray gets wind of what's going on and follows on behind. This film definitely has a slightly different feel to it than the first one. So the first film was just as much a leaving school drama at times as it was a horror film. And obviously it had that big dilemma at the heart of it. The sequel is much more a no-frills popcorn slasher, which would be fine, but for the fact that it has this horrible twist about 10 minutes from the end. So it turns out that one of the main characters, Will, who we've been led to believe is a good guy for the majority of the movie, is actually a villain in league with Ben Willis, the fisherman. Now, the way that this is presented and revealed is right out of the Scream playbook. I mean, I can literally hear Will in my head almost going, "Surprise, Julie!" He doesn't actually say that, but he might as well have done, because the way he outs himself, it's like he's doing an audition for Scream. I think this franchise should have just carried on doing its own thing instead of trying to copy other successful films of the time. And what makes this whole development worse is the fact that I really liked Will up until this point in the film. I was rooting for him to get with Julie. I felt sorry for the kid. He's on holiday in the Bahamas. There's this really nice girl who's just slightly out of reach because she's still carrying a candle for someone else, but he seemed like a nice guy. He's polite, he's sensitive. And you know what? I feel like I've had my support of Will thrown right back in my face. I'm not happy. I'll tell you what, me and him are no longer friends. I swear to God. If it wasn't for this twist, though, I'd be saying that this sequel is almost as good as the first one, because once we get past this criticism, I don't really have much more to say that's negative in the entire review, apart from maybe the fact that Ray has this journey to the Bahamas that's separate from everybody else, because I found that quite distracting and tiresome, at least on my first run through the film. The second time I watched the movie, it didn't seem as bad. But apparently it wasn't in the script that he was going to do this. He couldn't spend as much time at the resort as the other actors and actresses because there was a scheduling conflict with him doing a film called Wing Commander or something, so they had to sort of find a way around that. But yeah, I would have preferred it if he just travelled to the island with everyone else. If we move on to the positives now, there's no better place to start than Jennifer Love Hewitt, because she is amazing in this film. She was good in the first one, but her confidence and stage presence, it seemed, grew so much in the 12-month gap between the first film and the second film. I don't know if this is because maybe she felt that her capability of playing a role like this had been validated after the success of the original, or maybe she just found it easier to shine away from the more all-star ensemble cast of that first film. Who knows? But watching this made me feel sad, actually, that she didn't really go on to be in any more horror films, because she makes a great final girl. None of the other lead actors or characters impressed me that much. Brandy can stay with music as far as I'm concerned, sadly. I did like Will until he turned turncoat, and Freddie Prinze Jr.'s role is so reduced that I can't really judge the performance that much. A lot of the smaller characters in I Still Know What You Did Last Summer are very entertaining, as to be said. I liked Ray's friend, who sort of accompanies him when he leaves the fisheries at the start of the film. He's only in a couple of scenes, but he's very funny. I didn't notice during the movie that Jennifer Esposito was playing the barmaid at the resort. I've seen her play a cop in Blue Bloods, which would have been about 15 years after this, but her features look so young in this film that I totally did not notice her. Jack Black plays a sort of young janitor at the resort. He's hilarious. He's like this Jamaican white guy with dreadlocks who just walks around getting stoned all the time. He's only in 3 or 4 scenes, but he's very funny. As soon as I saw him in this one scene, though, where he's sat on a couch by himself and there's no other characters around, I knew we'd arrived at his death scene, sadly. Muse Watson once again plays the fisherman. When his face gets revealed at the end of the first film, I kind of felt a bit underwhelmed, as if maybe I was expecting like a mangled up Jason Voorhees type face under there, or Cropsey from The Burning. But by the time I got round to watching the second film, I'd gotten used to Muse Watson being the guy in my head, and so he went back to being creepy again. I like the holiday destination in this. It's sort of cool that they don't just reuse Southport or set the film at Julie's college, which might have made it feel a bit too similar to Scream 2. I don't think I've seen that many horror films set on holiday resorts. Fantasy Island comes to mind from last year, but that film was so bad it's barely worth mentioning. The Shining, not really the same subgenre. This film's meant to take place in the Bahamas, but they filmed at a hotel in Mexico, and they found a really good one because I love the structure of this place. It's really atmospheric. I like how they found a good excuse to get all the guests off-site. It just adds to the isolationism for our main characters. And because it's an island, they can't get away easily once they realise that the fisherman is in their midst. There's a storm coming in as well. Of course, there's a storm coming in. There are so many good scenes in this film, though. One of them doesn't even take place on the island. It takes place near the start, where Julie and her friends are just sort of kicking back and relaxing in this nightclub. I said in my review for Haunt that I like it in horror films when there's an early scene in a nightclub or a bar. It just gives the characters a chance to unwind early on and give us a chance to get to know them and see what the lay of the land is. Plus, a nightclub is a great place for a killer to sort of stalk protagonists from the shadows. I like the sunbed scene in this film as well. And the irony of Julie being in that predicament is that last week I was reviewing Final Destination 3, where 2 characters do die in sunbeds, so she almost makes it a hat-trick, does Julie, in this. I like the karaoke scene as well. That's a lot of fun, watching Jennifer Love Hewitt perform a number. Having said that, I still prefer the singing performance from the first film, where that prom queen tries to do some kind of song, but she's so bad that Sarah Michelle Gellar just looks at her like this. I raved in my review for the first film about the chase between the fisherman and Helen. Well, there's almost as good a chase in this one, except this time there are 3 people running away from the fisherman at the same time, which is sort of cool. I don't think the ending in the graveyard is as effective as the one on the fishing boat, although part of that is because Will is in the midst this time around. One victory the sequel does score over the original film, though, is in the soundtrack. There were so many good songs throughout this that just left me thinking, oh, I've got to check the soundtrack out in the next few days. Still haven't got around to it, but I will do. If you take all the best music from both of these films and put them together onto one album, I think you'd have a hell of a record. When it comes to the ending, where Julie and Ray have sort of moved on together and they're cohabiting and they're engaged or married and whatever, and then the fisherman comes back and grabs Julie's legs under the bed and presumably kills her, I don't think that's actually happening. I think this is just another dream sequence like at the end of the first film. If they'd have not found Ben Willis's body in that grave, I can't imagine that Julie would be so happy in this future scenario. Can you imagine her reaction if the police had come up to her and said, "We looked in the grave, but we just missed him again. I'm sorry, you'll just have to get him next time, kidder." God knows what they were planning for the third film in order to explain how the fisherman comes back, because originally Jennifer Love Hewitt and Freddie Prinze Jr. were signed on for a third film, but it didn't go ahead because the box office for the second film just wasn't good enough. I know there was eventually a third film, but it wasn't the type of third film that they were envisioning, if you see what I mean. So I guess we've just about reached conclusion time then, and I hate to bang on like a broken record all night about Will, but if it wasn't for that plot twist, I would probably rate this film right up there alongside the first in terms of my score. As it is, I still really enjoy it. The guy on the audio commentary describes this film as an 80s slasher set at the end of the 90s, and I think that's really fair. It's part of the reason why it's up my street. I do enjoy it, and in the future, whenever I rewatch the first film, I will definitely follow that up by watching this one again the same week, if possible. I think even though this film's not going to get the same score as the first one, it still belongs in the same breath. The quality is still there. I'm not sure about the third film yet, whether I'll ever rewatch that in the future. I've heard that it's quite bad, so I guess we'll get to that one next. But first, let's get to the bag of terror and find out what the score is for this. We've got 1, 2, 3. 3.5 bloody axes out of 5 for I Still Know What You Did Last Summer. I'll be back then for I'll Always Know What You Did Last Summer very soon, and stay tuned to see another pin going into my horror locations map, because I'm going to add one for the Bahamas. Right, until next time, cheerio, bye-bye.